A viewer recently asked a question about basic maintenance for the bass. And so I thought, let's do a short video today talking about some basic things to take care of our instrument. Welcome to Learn Jazz Bass with Matt Rybicki. I'm glad that you're here. So let's just talk about some real basic things about the instrument itself and what we can do to try to keep it at its healthiest place. The first thing I want to mention is that, of course, a luthier is your best friend. And hopefully there is someone in your general area that you can get to for important things that might need attention on the instrument. And hopefully it wouldn't be too expensive. Sometimes it can be a real bear. That said, there's a whole host of things that we can do to sort of just maintain it and keep it at its sort of healthiest place. The first thing is to sort of inspect the instrument itself for any kinds of problems. And one thing that I find a lot in younger students in particular is the location, position, and angle of their bridge. Ultimately, you want to have the bridge centered on the top, in between the F holes, equidistant between the F holes, and that little diamond notch that is on the F hole actually indicates where, theoretically, when the bass was made, the middle of the bridge, sort of north-south, where that should be. So that wants to be centered on those little notches on the F hole. It's not always the same for every bass, and it's not always actually ultimately the best place for it. Depending on how old the instrument is, it may need to be moved for a whole host of reasons. But checking that can be very helpful. And oftentimes, the bridge itself, like if we're looking at the side of the bass, the bridge should, some people say exactly 90 degrees, have a flat angle at the bottom, some not. There's difference of opinions of that. But what you don't want to see is just a really strong, dramatic over-correction into one direction. So if it's parallel to the ground, you don't want it pointing way up nor way down. And very cheap bridges that especially haven't been taken care of can also bow up really weirdly and ultimately is not good for the health of the instrument. So check the position of the bridge itself, and you can actually push it back down more parallel to the ground. It's best to do if you loosen most of the strings, not all of them, because the Soundpost could fall down if you loosen them all. So you can loosen a couple of them and you can push it down with your thumb, just a touch. And sometimes it helps to sort of put your hand on your knee as you press it down so that you can keep it sort of controlled as you put it down. If you're scared of doing that, loosen the strings. So the position of the bridge is important. Also, you want to be looking, of course, for cracks and open seams. When I say open seam, I mean where does the top of the instrument meet the ribs, for example. So inspect it all over, look for visible separation between the back and the side, or the top and the side, and so on and so forth. And a luthier will be able to just glue it down. If you see a separation, that's not a terrible thing. It's in fact supposed to happen. The glue that is used is meant to give with weather changes. So an open seam is not a big deal. A crack, depending on where it could be and how big it is, can or may not be a big deal. But generally, cracks need to be repaired by a luthier, and really seams should be done by a luthier too, but you can get hide glue and sort of learn how to do it yourself. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but if you really need to, you can do it yourself. Repairing a crack is a much more delicate and masterful thing that you need to go to somebody else for. So you want to inspect for that, right? One way to prevent that problem of cracks or open seams is to think about humidity. And that is really the main culprit of problems for instruments, again, speaking very generically and broadly. So you want to keep your bass in a controlled environment if you can. And there's two simple tools to help with that. One is a humidifier, and I really recommend not getting a heated humidifier just for the cleaning issues and mold developing in the humidifier and so on and so forth. So get a cool mist one, and also a hygrometer, which is a small device that measures how much humidity is in the air. Ideally, you want to keep it above 30% humidity in the room, and most people say sort of closer to 40 or even 50%. The real trouble comes if you drop humidity dramatically from a very humid environment to a not, and then keep doing that over and over again, that's going to cause cracks and separations and so on and so forth, because the wood is expanding and contracting, expanding and contracting because of the humidity. So these couple of things, and it doesn't have to be a fancy humidifier necessarily, although bigger ones can, fill up a room a little bit easier. But so I'm always watching that, even in the summer. I mean, usually it's not a problem in the summer, but here in the sort of mid-south or, in the north, we definitely have to think about the seasons and the change in humidity over the seasons. I remember when I was at Juilliard and we had to rehearse uptown. We couldn't actually rehearse in the school because they didn't want us there. They didn't want us rehearsing the big band in the actual school, which was kind of jive. And anyway, we had to go on the subway to big band rehearsal, and because I was so busy at the time and didn't have time to get to luthier, and it was winter, and I'm taking it there 3 days a week, taking it outside from a humid place to an outside place, I got lots of cracks in my really good bass at the time, which was really a drag just because I had to take it on the subway so often and take it out of that controlled environment. Anyway, so that's a really helpful thing. Another thing is, of course, to try to keep the instrument clean, but you don't have to get obsessive about it. It does make sense to wipe down your strings after you play. If your hands are particularly moist, or you have dirt on them, or oil, very oily or whatever, it's good to wipe down this part of the strings, of course, but also the lower part by the bridge where we would bow, especially if you bow a lot. You want to clean that off, ideally every time after you play. Just keep some kind of rag with you. I recently learned about this, that there is some issue with using microfiber cloths. I guess there's microplastics in there, which I didn't realize. It's not great, but nonetheless, I do use a microfiber cloth to clean the strings. I find it's effective. If you get a lot of funk on steel strings, you can use rubbing alcohol sparingly to clean them off as well. Just be sure you obviously don't get it on the finish of the top, and so on and so forth. So cleaning that and then just dusting your bass with a rag is helpful. I try to keep a separate rag when I'm dealing with rosin. Like if rosin gets on the top, if I'm bowing a lot, I'm going to use sort of my rosin rag to try to get that off, and I'm replacing it or cleaning it often so I'm not dragging rosin across the top. Eventually though, enough rosin may build up that you can't get it off. Don't try to do that by yourself. Take that to a luthier for what's called a French polish, and they will be able to take the rosin off for you if that's important to you. It doesn't usually make a huge difference, but sometimes it can get really caked up on there. That can be prevented by regular maintenance, of course. So additionally, if you have just an old toothbrush can also help, to get stuff off of the strings, and your bow as well. You can run a toothbrush through the hair to get some rosin out of the hair if you need to. So that is helpful to keep it clean. And when you are really sticky, like when you've got some really bad issues with your strings, again, I'm talking steel strings, you can also use steel wool, and some people may disagree with this, don't kill me, but it's worked for me, that I use very, very fine steel wool and actually gently rub the strings themselves, and that will take gunk off of there. And if you take like a alcohol wipe that you would, rub on your shoulder to get an injection or whatever, and rub it on the strings, you'll see a lot of funk come out of there. You don't have to go crazy with it, but you can get them cleaner like that. With gut strings, it's a different story. Real gut, it is recommended that you do actually oil them regularly. Almond oil is suggested, and I have done that in the past. And you also may get some stray hairs on the string itself, like hairs from the actual gut sticking out, and you can clip those with fingernail clippers, or some people actually burn them off with a lighter. Obviously be careful with that. Nonetheless, I also just want to share a little sort of weird experience I had with oil though. Be careful. I bought some, I can't remember what it wasn't almond oil that I remember. I think it was something else that was suggested. And for whatever reason, the formulation of this particular oil never came off. And in fact, some gear that is in a bag that I use for gigs that I have my amplifier head in and lights and stuff like that, it's still covered in this oil. That I didn't spill it. It was just like on my hands, and I touched this stuff and it will not come off. I replaced the bag. I tried to get it off with Goo Gone, all this kind of stuff. I can't get this stuff off. So just be careful how much you use. And in fact, it kind of ruined the synthetic strings that I had. I was told that it would be okay if I put this oil on these synthetic strings because I felt like they were getting sticky. but in fact that didn't help. So just be careful if you're going to use oil on your strings, and obviously you don't want to get excess on anything. When you're changing strings, there's a couple things you can do as well to, I think, help. To me, I just feel better knowing things are a little cleaner. You can clean your fingerboard actually with not only this rubbing alcohol. I know some people disagree with this. Again, I've done it many times. It seems to be totally fine as long as you don't overdo it. You can use some rubbing alcohol on the fingerboard itself when you're changing a string, and be sure to dry it right away, right? But that's going to take a lot of gunk off of there. And you can also use this very, very fine steel wool on the fingerboard itself. Try not to inhale the ebony. It's not good for you if you get a lot off, but you shouldn't be rubbing it so much that you can like actually see ebony coming off. So it really is just about getting it, you know, back to sort of a stable state and not a lot of funk on there. When you are also changing a string, lots of folks didn't know, and I didn't know for a long time, how beneficial it is to use a pencil, use the pencil lead, and actually put it in the grooves, in the nut and on the bridge, to allow the string to move more freely. It acts as essentially a lubricant to allow this less friction when the string is moving in those notches, in those grooves. I used to have strings break on me all the time, and I thought it was just because I was strong, but it was really because the nut was pinching the string, and so when I was tuning it, eventually it loosened, it degraded the integrity of the string itself and would break at the nut. So that's a really helpful and simple thing you can do when you are changing strings too. And then physically, when you are sort of interacting with the bass, as you probably already know, but just in case you didn't, it always makes sense to put it in a corner with both shoulders touching the corner of the walls. I discovered when I got my new office here, and this paint is a flat paint that I didn't want. I like the color, but nonetheless, it actually leaves marks on the wall. So I put a towel, or just a hand towel, between the base and the corners itself. And you want to put the bridge facing in. You can do it the other way, but it sort of balances a little bit better that way, and also protects the bridge from being hit accidentally. And also when you put it down, obviously put it on its side. Makes a lot of sense. They do have other stands that you can actually set it on specifically, that sort of mimics, it doesn't go all the way down, but you can sort of set it on this special stand so it's partially up. I want to avoid that. Of course, you want to avoid that as much as possible. You want to keep it as stable as possible, as much as you can, because obviously falls are going to be bad news for the bass. Speaking of sort of breaking a bass, I was also told, and I follow this, although I'm not sure how true it is, but when you're traveling in a car with the instrument, put the neck towards the back of the bass, so that the scroll is facing the back window, because if you are hit from the back, it will hit your neck first, and that's an easier thing to repair than if it were to hit the actual body of the bass. I thought that was kind of a cool, clever little thing. And you may not want to go this far either, but I had sort of I use a little pillow as well, besides putting my bass on a couple of long sort of foam things to keep it from actually resting on the back of my SUV. I also have a little pillow that the scroll rests on too. So what I'm trying to do is prevent the bass from having a lot of violent sort of up and down from the car on a road. So that can be something that can help as well with maintaining, the overall health of the instrument. If you have an issue with the Soundpost, for example, if it falls down, if you want to try to adjust it, that's something that's going to take a lot of expertise or a lot of experience to deal with. So you can learn how to do it, but definitely that's something that you want to take to a luthier. So luthiers would deal with, if you've got a crack in the neck, for example, this is one place you want to examine on the bass, is where is the neck block meeting the shoulders and the ribs and so on and so forth. This is a place where things can go wrong. This is generally something you want to address right away, because the tension of the strings can pull your neck this way out of the body, will continue to pull the neck away from the body. So that's something you need to address right away. Soundpost things you should address right away. And big cracks, obviously, you should address right away. You can play the bass with problems. I had a massive, massive crack in my older Hawks that happened on a flight. They dropped the flight case right on the front, and there was a huge, along the whole top, a crack right at the bass bar. And so there was no choice. I mean, the crack was huge. I got to the gig, there was no other option. I had to play the bass on the gig, and it worked. It didn't sound great. And that's generally the downside of this, is like a seam separation or a big crack is not only not healthy for the bass, but will affect the sound in a negative way. So ultimately, we're just trying to keep the sound going as good, as well as possible. Other little minor things that might happen is if you look at the end pin collar, where the end pin meets the bottom of the bass, the bottom rib, sometimes that sort of pulls away out of the bass a little bit. It depends on the situation as to how much of an issue that might be. But when you go to a luthier, be sure to have a list of things that you want them to check out, and that might be something you should get somebody else's opinion about. Hey, is this pulling out too much? Just this tension on the bass is incredible. The amount of actual physical force that's being pushed down onto the instrument is really, really, really intense. So it's gonna pull all this wood in a really weird way. As far as buzzes go, that is, I smile and laugh because all luthiers know this is this, massive sort of issue that we're always trying to fight with. And it's very, very frustrating to usually try to find some kind of buzz or some kind of weird sound because everything is reverberating together. And so it could be coming from a place that you never expect. Just to also share a little bit of personal experience, sometimes, multiple times, and especially in this particular bass, this Hawks, the tuning machines are actually the culprit as to what's buzzing. It can sound like there's buzzing in the bass itself or on the top, but actually it's here. So if I just slightly pull on one of the tuning machines or just even hold it, sometimes that solves the problem, or just like detune it and retune it, and that will fix the little buzz that you hear that seems like it's coming from somewhere else. So to that end, like the buzz might be coming from someplace sort of really mysterious. We don't necessarily always be able to find it in the easiest way. If you've got loose tuning pegs, by the way, if you've got something loose and you don't have a minute to fix it right away, you can just wrap a rubber band between the two so that you're exerting pressure. They're sort of squeezing them together a little bit, and that generally will oftentimes stop some buzzes. But many buzzes are boy, hard to track down. This is an awesome and difficult instrument to figure out. I hope that all this stuff was helpful for you, as always, and I've got a PDF for you just sort of listing all these things that we discussed today. Thanks for joining me. I'm glad that you were here. Look for that PDF below, and always remember, straight ahead and strive for tone.